Almost 10 years ago to this day, down a back street in Southampton, I made one of the most amazing discoveries as an organist. Instead of going to the shopping centre and worshipping the gods of consumerism, I rifled through old dusty books at the Oxfam charity shop, and there I found this one, simply titled Organ Works of Johann Sebastian Bach, £3.99, and with the initials JHD etched into the front page. We will never know who JHD is or was, but they provided me with one of the greatest organ pieces that I've ever learnt. It's my favourite piece of music, and of all the great ancient buildings of England. It takes the humble village church organ to do Bach proud. A very moody sky this afternoon, but aside from the distant sound of barking dogs and the birds, it's almost completely silent here. I wonder if you've heard the poem Gray's Elegy. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. The old thatched cottage over there, remote, boarded up, and the trees looming, and this almost prehistoric landscape, which really characterises the New Forest. The only sound which is really disturbing the peace is the sound of aeroplanes. We're not far from Bournemouth Airport. This area looks very isolated, doesn't it? But there is an airport very near here. In fact, there was also an RAF airfield in Bisterne, which was used mainly by American pilots. It was closed in 1944 and then grassed over, and nothing remains. There are clearly signs of agriculture here, but luckily there are no cows. My cow anecdote 2 videos ago really caused a stir in a good way, because when I said it, I was speaking my mind, but I thought a lot of people would comment saying, no, cows are fine. But actually I got lots of comments affirming what I'd thought, which is that cows are actually quite dangerous. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks so. If there's something you particularly feel when you're watching my various village ramblings, in both senses of the word, do write it in the comments, because I read every single comment, and if I don't read it, then my family does, and they tell me about it if I've missed it. And your comments are what really inspire the discussions in these videos. Even if you don't know it, it's really useful to get feedback and different opinions. One thing that I find really interesting is those of you watching who are from another country, of which there are many of you and countries. This landscape must seem quite alien and quite, I wouldn't use the word exotic, but there, I just did. And to me it's quite normal. So I like to describe what I see, and in the same way, if it seems interesting to you and unique and different and even exotic, do let me know in the comments, because it's really interesting to hear. The sun is just beginning to shine, but it can't break through those layers of billowing clouds. No sign of any church yet. The church we're heading to was built in the middle of the 19th century, so it's much newer than what we're used to. But to me, from photos, it looks just as stunning actually. Very striking and severe facade. Gothic. Or Gothic revival, I should say. Pointed windows, towers, like Salisbury Cathedral. This church, St. Paul's, is really a monument to the Mills family in many ways. The estate has remained in the family through successive generations, and it's still owned by the Mills family to this day, although the church is of course a parish church. Interesting how much the landscape has changed, because I can just see in the distance the road which runs towards Christchurch. Now that in 1800 would have been a dust track, and that's how people would have reached Ringwood on foot or by horse. Extraordinary to think of the changes that have taken place, although many of the cottages with their thatched roofs still hark back to those years. We're coming at last to the field edge, and despite large piles of claggy dung, I'm pleased to say I haven't seen a single cow. To my right, dense ferns, so characteristic of the New Forest. But the field gives way to a long alley of old oak trees. And this should take us to our final destination. I'm sorry to say that signs of modernity are drawing ever closer, because I can hear the rumble of traffic on the main road in the distance. Still, no sign of the church. Or is there? Wow. Do you see it there? Just peeping over the hedge. Let me establish one thing very clearly about St. Paul's Church, Bisterne. This is a church which is so often ignored. You drive past it at 60 miles an hour and you completely miss it. Whereas approach it from this angle and you see it as its builder would have intended. A building which, in all its imposing glory, already conjures up the first few bars of Bach's Passacaglia. There was me talking about modernity, and then we see M. Loder and Sons, established 1875, trundling past. Fantastic. And so is the church. Traffic is absolutely plummeting past this church, but the building itself, spectacular. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. For a roadside chapel, this building is awe-inspiring. I've passed St. Paul's many times, but I've never been inside, and the church remains locked during the day. But it's a haunting and majestic place, lofty and spacious, with row upon row of varnished pew, and a central aisle leading all the way to the altar. Built in 1842, the church was founded by the landowner John Mills of Bisterne Manor to serve parishioners and tenants on the estate. The church is his legacy, and he lies buried in a sealed vault under the floor. But most of all, it's a symbol of divine power. Everything points towards the heavens, from the sharp stone towers outside to the lancet windows and chancel arch. I must admit that this church is a sombre one. It's easier to imagine a funeral here than a wedding, and for the first time in months, I'm feeling a chill in the air. I must confess, friends, I'd forgotten how cold these churches get. It didn't seem so cold walking here, but I've decided to put on a coat, which I will take off when I perform on this organ, but for now I'm warming myself up. This is a very interesting looking instrument because the organ itself is built by J.W. Walker, a fantastic organ builder. It would have cost a lot of money to have this organ built. It hasn't just been plonked here, it's been designed bespoke for this church. Think of an organ as like playing the building. You're using the acoustic of the church to your best advantage. And a church like this has a lot of echo you can hear, so you need an organ which really makes the most of that. It needs to be large. This one is. Interestingly, this organ actually replaced a harmonium. Now, a harmonium is a tiny, tiny instrument about the size of a desk, which uses reeds rather than pipes. They are never as loud as pipe organs. Just look at the height of the organ. It projects right above everybody's heads, whereas a harmonium sometimes gets lost in all of the bodies and the furniture in the building. It's quite an intimidating looking instrument, actually, if you think of the people who built this organ who are long dead, but the organ remains and it stands here looking very stern. Slightly frightening, actually. This is, of course, the first I've seen of this instrument. I am struck by the fact that the whole organ seems to be leaning outwards, and I don't think that is intentional. If I put my spirit level on it, shall we see if it's level or not? You won't be able to see this very clearly, but on my phone there is a spirit level, a very handy app which I use for levelling my caravan, actually. And if I put it up against the front facade of this organ, we'll be able to see whether the organ is level vertically. I wasn't seeing things. This big hulk of an instrument looms over the player by a degree and a half or so. Slightly disconcerting. You can see the lean by comparing the front of the organ to the edge of the lancet window behind. The culprit is probably the rank of massive, heavy open diapason pipes, but these are also the instrument's greatest strength. J.W. Walker and Sons were famous for their rich, open diapason sound, and it's with this sound that I begin Bach's mighty Passacaglia. wave after wave of longing, mixed with triumph and bitter disappointment. Bach's Passacaglia in C minor. I am trying, and I will continue to try, to awaken these sleeping giants with heavenly music. And I'm pleased that more and more parishes are using my videos as a completely free way of promoting their church and its importance to the community. Personally, I'm not paid by any of the churches to make these films. I choose where I want to go, which organ I want to play, and when I'm going. But the films are made entirely by me, and there's lots of running around in the church to take photos and extra footage, as well as the performing and the practice. It's a hugely time-consuming effort on my part alone. If you enjoyed this series of films, you can support me personally using my PayPal link underneath the video. It's a fantastic way of doing that. If you'd prefer to send a cheque, do look at my website, benmaytonmusic.co.uk, and there you'll find the address. Next week, I am trying my best to save a beautiful old reed organ from a barn near Salisbury and moving it to one of your favourite and most watched churches. The clue is in the ending music. But until then, cheerio.